Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast episode on Chapter 3 of Leadership Gems for Women. Be responsible. I love to think about this in terms, first, of taking responsibility for myself and then responsibility to other people. So it's a little bit different perspective on taking responsibility. But to kick off, I wanted to share a quote with you from John Maxwell. He says, "Reaching your God-given potential requires taking responsibility for yourself and your life. It means taking an active leadership role with yourself." And to me, that is so powerful because so much of the time we don't think about leading ourselves well is the key to being effectively able to influence other people. But it really starts with taking responsibility and for leading ourselves at a higher level. And that means doing the things that are going to help us get where we want to go, because no one's going to do it for us, right? So I think about this in terms of responsibility, taking responsibility for myself, number one. In other words, I'm going to take responsibility for me so that I can help other people, right? I've got to take responsibility and ownership for developing myself because I can't give someone what I don't have. And I have to take ownership of that. Ownership is a good way to think about that, is that level of responsibility of saying, rather than externalizing my results, my success, my influence, what I want out of life, rather than externalizing that and saying it's up to someone else should do it for me, someone else will do it for me. Both of those are misconceptions that will hold you back in life. They're probably two of the three of the biggest forms of limiting beliefs: believing that someone else will do it, believing that someone else should do it. Because as long as you're externalizing the blame, the thing about it is it's very easy to do that, because as long as I'm waiting on someone else, as long as I'm externalizing that blame or that lack of success, that lack of control, as long as I'm not taking responsibility, then I don't have to do anything about it, right? If I can't do anything about it, then I don't have to do anything about it. It's his fault. And, this can play out in a lot of different ways, but one of them I'll share with you is certainly an example that's relevant from my life, from my experience. Is I can remember being in a job at a specific time and thinking they're not paying me enough and wanting to blame the job that I was in for not paying me the money that I thought I was worth. Now, whether or not I should have been paid more is not the point. My point here is I was externalizing the fact of my paycheck and I'm waiting on them to do something about it. They should do that. It's their responsibility to pay me more money because I'm a hard worker. May or may not be true, but as long as I'm waiting on them to do it, I may never get it, right? As long as I'm just blaming them for not making as much money as I want, then I may never make more money. I could still be working in that job, but instead, I had that realization. I probably couldn't have articulated it back then the way I do now. But somewhere along the line, I realized, just a light bulb moment. It's like, hey, if I quit waiting on them to do something about how much money I'm making and I start doing that, taking ownership of that, then I'm in control. Now, maybe that means becoming more valuable or taking on more responsibility so that I'm worth more to the organization. Maybe that means finding an organization that values me different. Maybe that means starting a side business so that I can make more money. Whatever that looks like, I just have to take ownership and saying, rather than blaming someone or something else for my lack of success in life, I'm going to do something about it. Because playing the victim is not going to take me where I want to go in life. It's not going to take you where you want to go in life. Yes, life is not fair, and that's going to show up in a lot of different ways for a lot of different people. But as long as I'm willing to take ownership for myself and for leading myself at a higher level, take ownership for my life and take responsibility for making what I want to happen, then I don't have to worry about it. Life is never going to be fair. And if I sit around waiting for it to be fair, I'm just going to be sorely disappointed for the rest of my life. If I am not working in the job that I want, if I don't have the career that I want, if I don't have the house that I wanted, the relationship that I want, I've got to take ownership for doing something about it, whatever that looks like. I can remember when I started my first job, I was working at Pizza Hut. I've shared that story before on this podcast, but I'm sitting there, I get my first paycheck, and let me just share with you, When you're a waitress making $2.13 an hour plus some tips, but when you get your paycheck, even if you work 40 hours at $2.13 an hour, that paycheck is going to be pretty small. And I remember, I have a picture of it somewhere. In fact, I think I probably still have the pay stub. I kept it. I remember getting that first paycheck, and it was like a defining moment that said, you know what? I don't want to do this the rest of my life. There's nothing wrong with waiting tables. We all start somewhere, and that's where I started. And I was grateful to get the opportunity, but I realized I didn't want to do that the rest of my life. But the job of my dreams wasn't going to come find me a Pizza Hut. If I wanted life to be different, I was going to have to do something different. I didn't have any experience to get another job. I didn't even have a high school diploma. I'd never been to school. I'd been homeschooled. And so I didn't have any, extracurricular activities or social. I didn't have anything that would make me interesting as a employment opportunity for most jobs, right? I didn't have any qualifications, but I was going to have to go earn those. They don't just hand them out for free on the corner, right? If I wanted other experiences, if I wanted certifications, if I wanted a college degree, I was going to have to go get it. And I did. Now, it wasn't easy and it took a long time, and that's a whole nother podcast story. But my point here is taking responsibility for ourselves, for our lives, will always take us further in life than pushing that responsibility off to someone else and playing the victim and externalizing the blame. It's easy to do, right? The reason we blame other people or other circumstances is because it's easy. As long as it's their fault or their responsibility, I don't have to do anything to fix it. But let me tell you, if you're always waiting on them to fix it and they never fix it, you're going to be miserable your whole life, right? Don't wait. You cannot wait. It's up to you to take that responsibility and that ownership. Hal Elrod said, the moment I take responsibility for anything, for everything, the moment I take responsibility for everything is the moment I can change anything. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, I could not have told you after getting that first paycheck more than 20 years ago, I would not have been able to even imagine how that first little moment of insight of taking ownership for my life would lead me to where I am today. But it all started with getting that check and going, I'm not satisfied with where this is going to take me in life. So I'm going to do something about it. And there again, I couldn't have explained it back then the way that I can explain it now. But my point to you is you're listening to this podcast. So at some level, you've already accepted responsibility for improving your life, your circumstances, and your influence, because you're listening to a personal growth and leadership podcast. So I know at some level, you've already taken that first step, taken ownership for saying, hey, I want to develop me so that I develop my options and opportunities and find more success with my results in life. So I know you're already a little bit further down that path because you're listening to this podcast or watching, if you're watching on YouTube. But it's very easy to get kind of blinders on, just like blinders that a horse wears so that they cannot see what's going on around them. They can only see what's going on straight forward. It's very easy to just get stuck in a rut in our day-to-day routines and our responsibilities. And sometimes we get kind of just focused on what's in front of us and we miss the things that are around us. But if you'll take a few minutes and look and saying, where do I need to take more responsibility in my life? Where do I need to take more ownership? Maybe that's responsibility for my physical health. It's absolutely true. It's unfortunately sad, but I see a lot of people who have health problems that are directly caused or influenced by health choices that they make. And yes, there are diseases out there that some people, didn't make lifestyle choices that contributed to them. But my point is, we've got to take ownership for our health and saying, I've got to do what I can do to influence my health in a positive way. And that means, drinking the right things, drinking more water. It means, eating the right healthy things for us, taking responsibility for knowing what my body needs, right? Taking responsibility for figuring out what are the things that I can do to increase my health or influence my health in a positive way. And let me take ownership of that, because if I'm just waiting for the doctor to make me feel better, it might never happen. And I see that example a lot, where people are just externalizing the blame for their health. And sure, part of life and part of being human is we're going to have diseases and things that pop up and health problems. But a lot of the time we can improve our health, or we can positively prevent those negative health outcomes by being proactive with our health now, exercising regularly, drinking more water. We know these things. We already know some of the things we can do to be more healthy, but a lot of times we say, oh, I'm just getting older, and so this hurts, or this happens, or this is wearing out. And those things may absolutely be true, but until you've taken ownership for your health, you don't know that you've done everything you can to improve the situation. So take ownership for that. This is taking ownership for our career choices, and taking ownership for, just like you, maybe you want to look around and say, I need to take ownership for and responsibility for making more money. If I want more money, then I need to take ownership for that and responsibility for doing that. Maybe it's starting your own business. Maybe it's finding a job that values you at a different level, whatever it is, right? Taking responsibility for everything is the moment you can change anything. Not immediately, not going to just wave a magic wand and fix it, but absolutely the moment you take responsibility, you've taken a step toward improving it, toward changing it. And as Viktor Frankl reminds us, when I can no longer change my circumstances, I'm challenged to change myself, right? I've got to change the mindset here, because belief drives behavior. My beliefs, my values are determining my thoughts. Those are determining my action or emotions. Emotions determine influencing my actions, and that's affecting my results in life. So it really starts with that mind shift, that shift in ownership, and then responsibility to others. I get a little more fired up about taking responsibility for myself, but taking responsibility to others is just as important, particularly if we are in a leadership role or a formal level of leadership. Then I have a responsibility to others, to develop them, to help them grow, to give them responsibility, to give them, to develop them, to give them opportunities. And I also have a responsibility to them to take the blame when things don't go right. Because if I'm the leader, that's part of my responsibility to them, is taking responsibility and saying, you know what, I missed this. As the leader, I should have been on top of this. This is where I should have done better. I can remember a situation where this happened. I was on the other end of it, actually. My leader took responsibility for a situation that most leaders probably would have said was my fault. And in this situation, it simply was a lack of knowledge and awareness in the role I was in. It was fairly new, and I just did not have the awareness and the knowledge. And so the situation just didn't have a really good outcome. And I remember sitting down with my leader at the time afterward, and we're talking about it. And just the most surprising thing is that she just took ownership. She said, you know what, I think this is where I missed this. This is my responsibility. This is my fault. I should have been more up to speed on this, blah, 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 blah. And, that was such a totally different experience, because a lot of times leaders want to blame other people. They want to blame their team members. They want to blame when things go wrong. But a really effective high-level leader will take that ownership and take the blame and say, you know what, I'm the leader. This was my responsibility. And boy, do you know that increased my respect for her 1,000-fold, right? It increased her influence with me 1,000-fold. Like I would follow her anywhere, because at that moment I realized she was a leader worth following. But it's very easy to do. If we're the leader, it's very easy to say, oh, so-and-so dropped the ball on this. But that's really a poor example of leadership. High-level leadership is taking responsibility to others and saying, you know what, I'm the leader. This is my responsibility. I have to take ownership of that. It's a different way of thinking about it, but I truly tell you, it will get you far greater results in life. It will increase your influence at an entirely different level when you first take responsibility for yourself and then take responsibility to others. And if you're not in a formal level of positional authority, That's taking responsibility and saying, you know what, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to take care of this without being asked. I'm going to step up and be more responsible, and then therefore more valuable. And we touched on that in a previous podcast a week or so ago. But taking responsibility for just stepping up and making the things happen, taking responsibility for saying, I'm going to stay on top of this. Even if, for example, maybe you send an email off to someone and you're just waiting on them to respond, but they don't respond, taking more responsibility, saying, hey, I'm going to follow up. I had this happen not too long ago, just a couple of days ago, where I'd sent an email to someone. I didn't get a response. So I sent another email to someone. I still didn't get a response. And so at this point, like 2 weeks had gone by, maybe not quite 2 weeks. And so I circled back around and I thought, oh, this is popping up again. I still haven't resolved this. I could just send another email, but I could take more responsibility by picking up the phone and calling the person. And when I did, I got in touch with her and she said, I'm so glad you called. She's like, I'm sorry, I haven't gotten back to you. I've seen your email, but I've got a lot of emails. She's like, I'm just so glad you called and we can just resolve it right here. And we resolved it. And like, it was a 5-minute phone call. But, I could have just said, well, it's her responsibility now. I've emailed her. I'll just wait for a response. But that's not taking ownership. And part of how we show up is taking ownership for that and saying, you know what, I'm going to be responsible for following it through until I can't follow it through anymore. And if that's the case, then I need to stop this channel and move on to something else. If this is truly something I can't make happen or can't effectively resolve, but I need to know that, right? Rather than just kicking the can down the road again and again and again, at some point, I need to take more responsibility and make something happen, right? Just like John Maxwell's quote. So couple of thoughts there on responsibility. I hope that's shifted your perspective just a little bit on responsibility for yourself and responsibility to other people. Until next time.
Start increasing your influence and maximizing your potential with Ria's audiobooks. Available at audible.com, amazon.com, and iBooks. Please visit riastory.com to learn about Ria's books, resources, speaking, and training programs. Thanks for listening.